3,000 years ago, this empire rivaled Egypt. It defeated kings, controlled enormous territories, changed the balance of power across the ancient world. Then it vanished, not only from the map, but from human memory itself. For thousands of years, nobody even knew it had existed. The story of the Hittites begins not with legends or chronicles, but with silence. For centuries, the ruins scattered across the Anatolian plateau stood without a name, their builders forgotten by history. Yet 3,000 years ago, these stones belonged to a superpower, an empire that rivaled Egypt, toppled kings, and ruled lands from the Aegean to the Euphrates. The scale of what survived, fortress walls, shattered gates, and fragments of lost cities, speaks to a vanished greatness. But what is most striking is what's missing. No unbroken line of memory, no stories passed down, no later civilization claiming their legacy. The Hittites disappeared not just from the world, but from human memory itself. Their fate is a double mystery, one of sudden collapse and then of erasure so complete that rediscovery would take millennia. This is not a tale of a single cause or a simple fall. It is an investigation into how a world power can vanish twice, leaving only questions in the dust. On a windswept plateau above the curve of the Kizilirmak River, the ruins of Hattusa rise from the earth, a forgotten capital once at the heart of an empire. Sprawling across nearly 180 hectares, the city's stone walls snake over the hills, punctuated by gates carved with lions, sphinxes, and kings. These were not just defenses, they were declarations of royal power, visible for miles in every direction. At the summit stood Buyukale, the royal citadel, while below stretched the lower town, anchored by the great temple and a maze of public spaces. Temples and shrines multiplied across the city, their presence matched by the rock sanctuary of Yazilikaya, where gods and ancestors were carved into stone. Beneath the surface, enormous grain silos and rock-cut reservoirs reveal a system built for survival, a redistributive economy where the state gathered and controlled food for its people. Cuneiform tablets, pressed into clay, formed a documentary layer as dense as the city itself, recording the rhythms of law, ritual, and daily life. From a stronghold in central Anatolia, the Hittite kingdom began its climb toward empire in the 17th century BCE. The first great kings, Hattusili I and his grandson Mursili I, set out from Hattusa to conquer neighboring lands, forging a realm that stretched beyond its original plateau. Mursili's march on Babylon, around 1595 BCE, sent shockwaves across the ancient world. The sack of Babylon was not just a feat of arms. It announced the arrival of a new power capable of reaching deep into Mesopotamia, hundreds of miles from its Anatolian base. Yet the Hittite story was not one of uninterrupted conquest. The old kingdom faltered and fractured, its borders pressed by rivals on every side. In the west, the kingdom of Arzawa controlled the routes to the Aegean, while to the east, the Mitanni kingdom emerged as a formidable force between the Hittites and the Euphrates. These were not distant enemies. They were neighbors, each vying for control of the trade corridors that carried goods, tribute, and armies across the region. A new dynasty revived Hittite fortunes in the 14th century BCE. Suppiluliuma I, a master strategist, launched campaigns that broke the power of Mitanni and secured the empire's hold over northern Syria. Under his leadership, the Hittite realm expanded from the western edge of Anatolia to the banks of the Euphrates. Some lands fell under direct rule, others sent tribute, or were governed by loyal kings, each bound to Hattusa by oath and by the ever-present threat of military force. By 1400 BCE, the Hittite Empire stood as a superpower. Its reach measured not just in territory, but in the network of alliances and dependencies that radiated from its capital. Across the northern stretch of Syria, a narrow corridor of cities and kingdoms became the front line between two superpowers. The Levant, prized for its trade routes and rich resources, linked the Mediterranean world to Mesopotamia and Egypt. Here, the ambitions of the Hittite kings collided with the might of Egypt's pharaohs. Local rulers, caught between these giants, shifted their allegiance to whichever side promised greater protection or reward. Influence in this region meant access to tribute, control of vital roads, and the power to shape the political order of the Eastern Mediterranean. Egyptian gold and chariot armies alone could not guarantee dominance. The outcome would be decided not by wealth, but by the ability to command loyalty and project strength across shifting alliances. By the late 14th and 13th centuries BCE, the rivalry between Hattusa and Thebes had become a contest for the future of the ancient world. The sun hammered down on the plain by the Orontes River as two armies converged near Kadesh in 1274 BCE. On one side, Ramesses II, the pharaoh of Egypt, led his forces north in a bid to reclaim lost Syrian territories. Facing him was Muwatalli II, king of the Hittites, commanding a coalition of Anatolian and Syrian allies. The Hittite chariot corps, numbering in the thousands, moved with precision and speed, catching the Egyptian vanguard off guard. Egyptian accounts preserved in the poem and bulletin tell of a dramatic ambush. Ramesses, isolated and surrounded, calls on his god and rallies his men in a heroic counterattack. Yet beneath the triumphal language, the outcome blurs. The Hittite king's own records are silent on defeat. The city of Kadesh remained unconquered. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and neither gained the upper hand. Egyptian scribes proclaimed victory, but the Hittite line held firm, halting the Egyptian drive into Syria. In the end, survival became its own claim to success. The battle resolved nothing, but it reshaped the balance of power, leaving a legacy of contested glory and mutual exhaustion. In the shadow of chariot battles and shifting alliances, the survival of empires depended on more than force. After the clash at Kadesh, a different power took center stage, one shaped not by the sword, but by the seal and the written word. In 1259 BCE, Hattusili III and Ramesses II set their names to the world's oldest known peace treaty. Two tablets, one in Egyptian hieroglyphs, the other in Hittite cuneiform, carried the same promises. Borders respected, fugitives returned, armies held back, and a pledge of eternal friendship between kings. This was not submission, but recognition, an agreement between equals, each ruler a peer in the club of great powers. The treaty's language reached beyond war and peace. It outlined mutual assistance in times of threat and spelled out the extradition of those who fled from justice. Its clauses echo in the clay archives of Hattusa, where more than 50 diplomatic texts and over 200 legal statutes survive. These laws govern daily life, property disputes, theft, injury, abduction, marriage, and compensation. Restitution, not execution, was often the answer. A thief might repay silver instead of facing death, a quarrel settled by compensation rather than blood. The aim was stability, not vengeance. Royal seals, pressed into clay, made authority portable, proof of the king's will from the citadel to distant vassal lands. Letters crossed the ancient world, managing alliances, responding to crises, and negotiating with foreign courts. The Hittite administration operated in multiple languages, its scribes recording every judgment, oath, and agreement. In this world, Negotiation and legal procedure became instruments of power as vital as any army, weaving a web of order across a landscape of uncertainty. Iron's reputation as the secret weapon of the Hittites has outlasted the empire itself, but the truth is more subtle and more intriguing. The Hittites knew of iron, so did their neighbors, but for most of the Bronze Age, the metal was rare, precious, and reserved for ceremonial blades or royal gifts. Clay tablets from Hattusa mention iron as a prized commodity, not as the backbone of armies. No evidence points to a vast Hittite iron industry or to iron weapons deciding battles like Kadesh. Bronze remained the material of war. The Hittites played a part in the early story of iron, but they neither invented nor monopolized it. The leap to mass production would come centuries later, long after their world had vanished. Across the ancient world, the end of the Hittite Empire unfolded as part of a wider unraveling. Drought measured in the narrow rings of Anatolian juniper trees struck between 1198 and 1196 BCE, withering crops and shrinking the state's reserves. Tax collection faltered as the countryside dried, and the great grain silos of Hattusa stood emptier each season. Trade routes, once lifelines for tin, copper, and distant food, fell silent. On the frontiers, the Kaska tribes pressed harder, while rumors spread of migrating peoples by land and sea. Egyptian monuments speak of the sea peoples, but the collapse cannot be traced to a single invasion. In the royal archives, prayers of Mursili II plead for relief from plague, hinting at a population weakened by disease. Political authority eroded as every system, economic, military, administrative, strained under the weight of overlapping crises. The fall of the Hittites was not a single blow, but the slow convergence of drought, famine, disease, and broken alliances, a collapse of the world's fragile balance. Around 1190 BCE, fire gutted Hattusa's citadel and temples, ending the royal archive and silencing the last cuneiform tablets. The capital's collapse shattered the administrative network, but in places like Carchemish, Melide, and Tabal, local dynasties kept Hittite traditions alive, even as the empire's name faded. Without a central authority, memory fractured, and the ruins of Hattusa vanished from history for over 3 millennia. In 1834, Charles Texier mapped the site, misidentifying it as Pteria. Hugo Winkler's 1906 excavations revealed thousands of tablets, laws, treaties, royal letters exposing a lost civilization. In 1915, Bedřich Hrozný deciphered the Hittite language, recognizing the word for bread and unlocking a forgotten script. Archaeologists like Theo van den Hout and Andreas Schockner now piece together the evidence: burned walls, broken archives, and the rediscovered voices of a vanished empire. Civilizations rise, vanish, and sometimes vanish twice, wiped from maps, then from memory. Yet every buried tablet, every rediscovered stone restores their voices to our world. History isn't lost. It's waiting to be rediscovered. Like the video and subscribe to Lost Empires for more stories about forgotten civilizations, lost cities, and the greatest mysteries of history.